5 years had passed since that day in Jerusalem, when Mateo Hernandez, at only 4 years old, had revealed to the world the 3 lost testimonies of Yeshua. The boy who spoke with letters had grown. Now he was 9, and although his life seemed peaceful in Guadalajara, there was something in his honey-colored eyes that continued to shine with the same unforgettable intensity. Elena knew it. Sometimes she found him awake at midnight, looking out the window as if waiting for the sky to speak to him. He never mentioned the scrolls again, nor the symbols, nor the voice he used to hear. But something changed on the morning of March 14th, 2024. A letter arrived from Jerusalem, signed by Dr. Rashid Al-Masri. It bore an official seal from the Israel Museum of Antiquities and a handwritten phrase in the corner, "The impossible has just repeated itself." Elena opened it with trembling hands. Inside there was a single sheet and a photograph. The image showed a ceramic fragment discovered in a recent excavation near the Dead Sea. On the surface, an identical symbol to the one Mateo had described on the walls of the Nazareth cave was engraved, 3 circles intertwined by a vertical line, and below them a barely visible inscription in ancient Aramaic that said, "The guardian will awaken when the child returns." That same night, Mateo woke up startled. "Mom," he said with a trembling voice, "the words have returned." Elena hugged him, trying to hide her fear. "What do they say this time, my love?" The boy looked at her with a strange calm, almost adult. "They say that what Yeshua left was not just to be read, but to be awakened. They say that something sleeps beneath the desert." The next morning, Elena called Al-Masri. The archaeologist no longer worked at the museum. He had officially retired after the religious conflicts that followed the publication of the 3 testimonies. But his mind was still obsessed with the enigmas surrounding Mateo. "I have received the same sign," said Al-Masri from Jerusalem. A slight tremor near Qumran opened a crack in one of the sealed caves, and inside we found fragments that seemed to belong to a vessel older than the Dead Sea Scrolls. Mateo must come. Roberto opposed it immediately. "We won't subject him again to that media pressure. It was enough already." But Elena looked at him with determination. "This is not about fame or science. It's a calling. He feels it, and you know it." 3 days later, they were flying to Tel Aviv. Mateo, with his blue cap and notebook in hand, seemed calmer than his parents. He drew lines and spirals without saying a word, as if his mind were already there, in the desert. Upon landing, Dr. Samira Naguib was waiting for them, now director of the Jerusalem Archaeological Institute. "The place is under strict surveillance," she explained as they boarded a military convoy. "The Antiquities Authority does not allow public access. But if what we saw in the inscriptions is what we believe, we need Mateo." The landscape of the Judean desert stretched out like a petrified ocean under the sun. The convoy advanced for 2 hours until reaching a fenced area. There, a group of archaeologists worked around a narrow opening that descended into the rock. Al-Masri waited at the edge, his hair whiter, his voice softer. "Welcome back, little reader of the centuries." Mateo smiled shyly at him. "The words missed you," he said without irony. Al-Masri knelt before him. "Do you know what's down there?" Mateo closed his eyes for a moment. "Not yet, but I feel that Yeshua left something that breathes." The descent was difficult. The cave was narrow, damp, and smelled of old stone. Mateo was the first to enter, accompanied by his mother and 2 technicians. The flashlights illuminated walls covered in salt and dust. After a few meters, the passage widened into a circular chamber. In the center, half buried, there was a dark clay vessel. Its surface was cracked, but it still preserved engravings. Elena held her breath as Mateo approached. "Don't touch it yet," said Dr. Naguib, but the boy was already crouched observing the symbols. "This is not a container," he murmured. "It's a seal. What it guards must not come out until the words awaken." Dr. Al-Masri turned on a camera to record every detail. "Can you read anything, Mateo?" The boy nodded. "Here it says that Tobias was not the only one who wrote. Another left his story, one who saw what happened afterward." Eleanor felt a chill. "After what?" she asked, but Mateo did not respond. Instead, he began to trace with his finger over the vessel. "This symbol means breath, and this one, path. It says that the breath will reopen the path." Suddenly, a low rumble echoed in the cave like a deep echo. The sand began to slide slowly through the cracks in the floor. "Everyone out!" shouted Naguib. but Matteo remained motionless. "It's not danger," he said in a whisper. "It's a response." A current of cold air emerged from the bottom of the chamber. The flashlights flickered. When everything calmed down, the vessel had shifted a few centimeters, revealing a small opening underneath. "My God," murmured Al-Masri, "there's something inside." With extreme care, the archaeologists removed clay fragments until exposing a hidden compartment. Inside there was a piece of dry linen and, wrapped in it, a blackened metallic object by time. It looked like a key, but its shape was unusual. A central shaft with 3 intertwined rings, identical to the symbol engraved on the ceramic fragment. Matteo observed it in silence. "This key does not open a door," he said. "It opens a memory." That night, in the camp, Matteo could not sleep. He sat by the fire with the key in his hands, looking at it as if expecting it to speak. Al-Masri approached and sat beside him. "Do you know what all this means, son?" Matteo looked up. "Yes." Tobias guarded the testimonies, but someone else guarded the promise. Yeshua said that one day the word would take body again, that when the key was found, the message would become flesh once more. Al-Masri swallowed hard. "Are you saying there is a 4th testimony?" Matteo shook his head. "No. What comes cannot be written with ink." The next morning, news of the discovery leaked. Media from all over the world began arriving in Qumran. Helicopters, drones, journalists. The story of the boy who had read the words of Jesus reignited headlines. Elena tried to keep Matteo away from the cameras, but he seemed oblivious to everything. He only said one thing over and over: "We have to go to the Mount of Olives." Dr. Al-Masri tried to reason. "Matteo, why there?" The boy opened his notebook and showed a drawing made during the night. 3 mountains, a circle in the center, and a line of light descending from the sky. Because that's where he spoke for the last time before ascending. He said he would return in the same way. The key has to awaken the place where his voice was heard. That same afternoon, the team departed for Jerusalem. The sun was falling on the horizon when they arrived at the Mount of Olives. The air smelled of dust and old olive trees. Matteo walked to a specific point, right where the slope inclines toward the Kidron Valley. He knelt and placed the key on the ground. "Here," he said. "Below." The archaeologists began to dig. Not even 10 minutes passed before a tool struck something solid. Under a layer of stone and earth, a rectangular slab of white marble appeared. In the center, an engraving in ancient Aramaic, "For when the word needs to be heard again." Matteo closed his eyes and murmured something in a language no one recognized. A light wind rose among the trees, even though the air had been still seconds before. The key vibrated on the stone, emitting a faint sound, almost like a sigh. Then, slowly, a line of light began to trace around the slab, marking its edges with a golden glow. Elena shouted her son's name, but Matteo did not move. The earth trembled under their feet, and a beam of light ascended from the ground, illuminating the boy's face with an impossible glow. In that instant, Dr. Al-Masri felt something break inside him, a certainty that was neither rational nor scientific. What they were witnessing did not belong to the world of museums or archaeology. When the light faded, the slab had shifted, revealing a dark hollow. Matteo opened his eyes and whispered, "The Guardian has awakened." The silence that followed was unreal, as if the air itself had stopped. Only the sound of the wind among the olive trees broke the stillness. Elena ran to Matteo and hugged him tightly. The boy's body was warm, but his gaze was still lost in some invisible point. "What does that mean, my love? Who is the Guardian?" she asked with a choked voice. Matteo took a deep breath before responding. "It's not a person, Mum. It's the living memory of what Yeshua left. He knew that words could die, but memory cannot." Al-Masri, still on his knees in front of the hollow, pointed his flashlight inside. Down there, a chamber carved into the rock could be seen, barely larger than a sarcophagus. Inside, something glowed faintly. "We need to go down," said Dr. Naguib decisively. They prepared ropes and flashlights, and Matteo insisted on going first. "The words will guide me." He descended slowly, followed by Al-Masri and 2 technicians. As soon as they touched the bottom, the air changed. An aroma of myrrh and olive oil filled the chamber. Matteo advanced to the center, where a stone chest awaited them. Unlike the one they had found at Golgotha, this one was covered in symbols that seemed to move under the light. "Don't open it yet," warned Naguib from above, but Matteo was already running his fingers over the surface. "It's alive," he said in a low voice. "This chest listens." With delicacy, Al-Masri placed sensors around to record every vibration. "Matteo, if you can read, do it slowly." The boy closed his eyes. "Here it says that what sleeps inside cannot be touched by hands that doubt. It says that it contains the echo of the breath." Elena watched him from above, trembling. "The echo of what, son?" Matteo opened his eyes and looked at her. "Of the moment when Yeshua breathed for the last time." A murmur ran through the team. Al-Masri took a breath, incredulous. "Are you saying that here is his last breath?" Matteo nodded. "It was preserved to remember that life does not end when the air ceases, but when faith fades." With the help of tools, they managed to open the chest slowly. Inside there was a small glass sphere, sealed with ancient wax. In its interior, a golden mist moved as if it were alive. No one spoke for several seconds. Matteo knelt before the sphere. "This is not just an object," he said. "It's a promise." That night, they took the chest to the temporary laboratory set up in Jerusalem. Security measures were extreme. The discovery had to be kept secret until its authenticity was verified. While the scientists analyzed the composition of the crystal, Matteo remained seated in front of the display case where it rested. "What do you feel?" Dr. Naguib asked him. "As if someone is breathing inside," the boy replied. The next morning, an inexplicable phenomenon occurred. At 5:13 a.m., the laboratory's surveillance cameras recorded a pulse of light that emanated from the sphere and swept through the entire room. Thermal sensors detected a sudden 6-degree temperature increase in seconds. When Elena and Al-Masri arrived running, they found Matteo standing in front of the glass, with a serene expression. "He spoke," he said simply. Elena knelt down. "What did he tell you, love?" Matteo looked at her with tears. "That the message is not over yet. That the world heard the words, but did not understand their purpose. He said that what comes now will not be revealed with eyes but with hearts." Dr. Al-Masri, with a trembling voice, asked, "And what must we do?" Matteo raised his hand and pointed to the sphere. "Take it where everything began." Elena understood instantly. "To Nazareth?" The boy nodded. 3 days later, the team traveled north to Israel again. The government had discreetly approved the expedition, aware of the historical magnitude of the discovery. The cave where they had found the first testimony was still sealed, but Matteo assured that the path would be different this time. "We don't need to go back," he said as he looked at the horizon. "The promise awakens in the same place where it was born." They arrived in Nazareth at dawn. The air smelled of dust and jasmine. Matteo walked to the hills where Yeshua had once played as a child, according to ancient records. He stopped in front of a small stream that still ran between the stones. "This is where he made clay birds fly," he murmured. Then, without fear, he placed the crystal sphere on the water. For an instant, nothing happened, and then the stream began to glow with a soft light that spread downstream as if the water itself remembered something forgotten. Those present fell to their knees. The light rose in a spiral, ascending to the sky, and for a moment it seemed that the sun itself responded, pouring a golden glow over the entire valley. When the luminosity dissipated, the sphere had disappeared. In its place, small luminous particles floated that slowly dissolved into the air. Matteo smiled. "It has awakened," he said. The silence that followed was absolute. No one dared to speak. Al-Masri was the first to break it. "What just happened?" Matteo looked at him. "The Guardian fulfilled its task. The breath returned to where it belongs. We no longer need proof, now the truth lives in us." That night, in Jerusalem, something inexplicable occurred in different parts of the world. Monks in Tibet, rabbis in New York, pastors in Africa, and priests in Rome reported feeling a wave of light during prayer, a warmth in the chest, an indescribable sense of peace. Some called it coincidence, others miracle. But those who had been with Matteo knew it was neither one nor the other. It was the culmination of something that had begun centuries ago. The Vatican requested an urgent audience with Al-Masri and Dr. Naguib. They wanted the records, the recordings, any evidence. But the scientist responded that there was nothing to deliver. The sphere had disappeared completely, without leaving a physical trace. Only Matteo had the key, and he remained silent. "The words no longer speak to me," he told his mother weeks later. "Now they are part of everyone." Eleanor watched him with a mixture of relief and nostalgia. She had feared losing her son amid the mysteries surrounding him, but she understood that his mission had ended. However, one night in April, while the city slept, she heard a noise in Matteo's room. She found him awake, drawing in his notebook. On the page, he had traced a symbol she had never seen before, a circle of light crossed by a vertical line and 3 dots in the center. "What does that mean, love?" she asked softly. Matteo smiled. "It's what comes after the silence." The next morning, Al-Masri received a call from Egypt. A team of archaeologists had found under the sand near Sinai a slab covered in symbols, identical to those Matteo had drawn. And among them, an inscription in ancient Aramaic that said, "When the circle repeats, the message will breathe again." The world turned its attention back to the Mexican boy who had once read the impossible words. But Matteo did not return to fame or the cameras. His family discreetly disappeared from public life. Years later, historians would debate whether it was all real or an extraordinary coincidence. However, those who were present in Qumran on the Mount of Olives and in Nazareth never forgot what they felt when the light covered the valley. Dr. Al-Masri died 3 years later, leaving a letter for Elena. It said, "I dedicated my life to seeking evidence, but your son taught me that faith is also a form of science. Perhaps Yeshua did not want us to find things, but to remember what we are." Dr. Naguib took over the direction of a new research project on lost languages, inspired by Matteo's symbols, and in a corner of Guadalajara, a boy who was no longer a boy watched the stars with the same calm as always. That night, as the wind blew softly, Eleanor heard him murmur in his sleep, "The words are awake." She smiled and closed the window. Outside, a warm breeze swept through the streets, and for an instant, those who were still awake swore they heard something in the air, an ancient sigh, an echo of faith, a breath that seemed to come from the beginning of time. The legacy of Mateo Hernandez was not written in books nor kept in display cases. It lived in every act of compassion, in every forgiveness granted, in every act of love that men were still capable of offering. Because as Yeshua had said in his last testimony, the true temple of God is not in the stones nor in the heavens, but in the heart that chooses to believe.